It's 3 o'clock a.m. in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and the flight deck feels alive beneath your feet. A 19-year-old sailor stands in the dark, guiding a Navy fighter jet with nothing but hand signals. He's not the pilot, not an officer, and barely out of high school, yet the entire situation depends on him. A 7-month deployment quietly stretched into 9, then 10. The noise isn't just loud, it's physical, like a force pushing against your chest with every engine roar. The deck tilts with 15-foot waves, the wind cuts through his uniform, and the margin for error is almost zero. One wrong signal and the jet could slam into another aircraft or skid off the edge into the ocean. In that moment, a teenager holds the power of life and death in his hands. And this isn't rare, it happens every single night on U.S. aircraft carriers. Thousands of young sailors, many under 21, are trusted to manage machines more expensive than they will earn in a lifetime. It's easy to think military power is about technology, jets, ships, weapons, but this moment tells a different story. Because without that 19-year-old doing his job perfectly, none of that technology matters. The system only works because ordinary people perform under extraordinary pressure. That's the hidden truth most people never see when they watch jets take off on the news. But here's the deeper question. If everything depends on people like him, what happens when the system around them starts to break? Because the United States doesn't just rely on one sailor, it relies on an entire fleet. And right now, that fleet has a very specific number: 11 aircraft carriers. Not 10, not 12, exactly 11. At first glance, it sounds like a simple number, but it hides a much more complicated reality. Because in the world of aircraft carriers, what you have is very different from what you can actually use. When people hear that the United States has 11 aircraft carriers, it sounds like overwhelming power. 11 floating cities, 11 runways at sea, 11 symbols of global dominance. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The number 11 is misleading. Because in reality, the Navy doesn't have 11 carriers ready to fight. At any given moment, only about 3 of them are actually deployed and operational. Ships like the USS Harry S. Truman might be out at sea, launching jets and monitoring global hotspots. The rest? They're not idle, but they're not ready either. This is what the Navy calls the cycle, but we can think of it as a simple rule of thirds. One group is deployed, one group is preparing, and one group is in maintenance. Imagine owning 11 cars, but only 3 can drive right now. The others are either in the shop or still being tested after repairs. That's the reality of aircraft carriers. They don't just exist, they rotate. And that rotation is not optional. It's necessary for survival. Pilots need time to retrain, crews need rest, and ships need constant maintenance. Without that cycle, the entire system begins to crack under pressure. This is the mistake most people make. They think power is about how many you have. But in reality, power is about how many you can use right now when it matters. 11 sounds strong, but 3 is what actually protects the world at any given moment. And here's where things get fragile, because that system has almost no margin for error. If you lose just one carrier from that rotation, the balance starts to collapse. The system we just talked about works until the math breaks. And that's exactly what happened when the Navy dropped from 11 carriers to 10. In 2012, the Navy retired the USS Enterprise, CVN-65, one of the most iconic carriers in history. The replacement wasn't ready yet, but leaders believed they could make it work. On paper, losing one ship didn't seem like a big deal. In reality, it triggered a chain reaction no one could fully control. With one less carrier in the system, there was no longer a backup ready to replace ships at sea. So when a carrier deployed, it couldn't come home on time. A 7-month deployment quietly stretched into 9, then 10. And for the sailors on board, that extra time wasn't just inconvenient, it was life-changing. Imagine living in a space the size of a small closet, stacked 3 bunks high, with dozens of others around you. You share 4 showers with 100 people, and the noise of jet engines never really stops. Now imagine doing that not for 200 days, but for nearly 300. Calls home changed from "I'll be back soon" to "I don't know when I'm coming back." Families felt it first. Missed birthdays, missed holidays, missed milestones. Then came the deeper cracks. Divorce rates rose, morale dropped, and experienced sailors began to leave. Fighter pilots, trained at enormous cost, walked away for more stable lives on the outside. But the damage didn't stop with people. It spread to the ships themselves. Carriers pushed beyond their limits began to break down. Systems failed. Maintenance piled up. And when they finally returned, repairs took longer than expected, keeping them out of service even longer. This created a dangerous gap, periods where key regions had no US carrier presence at all. It wasn't just a scheduling problem anymore, it was a strategic vulnerability. What started as just one less ship became a full system breakdown, a slow, invisible collapse. The lesson is simple but brutal. These systems aren't designed with extra room. They're designed to barely hold together. And when you push them beyond that limit, they don't bend, they break. So if one missing carrier can do all this damage, why can't we just build more? The answer lies in something far less visible, but far more limiting. At first, the solution seems obvious. If one missing carrier causes so much damage, why not just build more? But this is where reality quietly pushes back. Because an aircraft carrier isn't just a ship, it's a nuclear-powered system bound by physics, time, and human limits. Every carrier goes through something called refueling and complex overhaul, or RCOH. And this isn't routine maintenance. It's more like open-heart surgery on a floating city. Around the 25-year mark, the nuclear fuel inside the ship runs out. To replace it, the Navy has to bring the ship into dry dock and drain millions of gallons of water. Then comes the unthinkable. They literally cut into the ship's hull to reach the reactor deep inside. Imagine slicing open a skyscraper just to replace its core systems. During this time, the carrier is completely unusable. No crew, no aircraft, no mission. A ship like the USS John C. Stennis can spend nearly 4 years in this state. 4 years, where a $13 billion asset is essentially a motionless construction site. And here's the part most people don't realize. You can't speed this up. Because you're dealing with nuclear material where even a small mistake could have catastrophic consequences. The people doing this work aren't just mechanics. They're highly specialized, nuclear-certified experts. You can't just hire more workers to go faster. There simply aren't enough of them. And all of this happens in one place. The shipyard run by Huntington Ingalls Industries in Virginia. It's the only facility in the United States capable of building and refueling nuclear supercarriers. That means every carrier, at some point, has to pass through this single bottleneck. If something disrupts this shipyard, a storm, an accident, or worse, the entire system slows down. And when the system slows down, the math we talked about earlier begins to fail again. This is the deeper reality. Military power isn't just limited by money, but by time and industrial capacity. You can write a bigger check, but you can't build time faster. And that's why 11 carriers isn't a flexible number. It's a hard ceiling. The system isn't designed to grow quickly. It's designed to barely keep up. The lesson here is simple. Power is not just about what you build, but how long it takes to build and maintain it. And when time becomes the limiting factor, even the strongest military starts to feel fragile. So if 11 is already the limit, what happens when the world demands even more? Because the next problem isn't about maintenance or manpower. It's about the future of warfare itself. Up to this point, 11 carriers sounds like a fragile balance, but one that still works. But the real question isn't about today. It's about what happens tomorrow. Because the world is changing faster than the system was designed for. Because the world is changing faster than the system was designed for. Imagine a scenario: rising tensions in the Pacific and a crisis around Taiwan. At the same time, instability spreads in the Middle East, threatening global oil routes. In that moment, the US Navy doesn't just need one carrier, it needs several in different parts of the world at the same time. Ships like the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower have already shown how critical that presence can be. When threats emerged in the Red Sea, it wasn't deployed from across the world. It was already there. That's what makes the number 11 work. Not speed, but presence. But here's where the future starts to complicate things. Potential adversaries are not standing still. They are building systems designed specifically to counter carriers. Long-range anti-ship missiles, hypersonic weapons, and advanced surveillance networks are changing the battlefield. Some experts even ask a difficult question: are aircraft carriers becoming obsolete? Others argue the opposite, that their flexibility and global reach still make them irreplaceable. The truth likely sits somewhere in between. Carriers are no longer invincible, but they are still essential. And that creates a new kind of pressure on the system we've been talking about. Because now, it's not just about having enough ships, it's about having them in the right place, at the right time, against smarter threats. 11 carriers might be enough for yesterday's world, but tomorrow may demand something more. or something different entirely. The lesson here isn't just about numbers, it's about adaptation. Military power must evolve, or it risks becoming irrelevant, no matter how strong it once was. Military power must evolve, or it risks becoming irrelevant, no matter how strong it once was. And maybe that's the most important takeaway of all. Because behind every number, 11, 10, or even 3, are real people, real limits, and real consequences. The system works today, not because it's perfect, but because it's just enough.